Welcome, everybody. Got a real awesome show for everybody today. Before anybody scratches their head and thinks Jay's been using the wrong moisturizer, he is not with us. We've got a special guest co-host, Leigh Coulling, with us. Leigh, how are you doing today?
Yeah, very well, James. Thanks for inviting me on today. And I'll try and do Jay Proud, but there's not a lot to for me to stand up to, really, is there?
No, I'm sure. And our guest today is Dan Cottrell. Dan, how are you?
I'm well, cold, but quite well. I've got my very warm heated blanket. If I have a top tip, is get a heated blanket in cold weather. No,
I
nothing to do with rugby.
I do feel the odd one out. Like Leigh said, I didn't get the dress code memo today,
No,
but
no, no.
Well, Christmas will be around soon, James. Oh no, it
Yeah,
won't
yeah,
be.
yeah.
So,
We'll save up on your behalf.
no, thank you very much. Um, so I think we'll kick off with a warm up and we'll chat a bit about rugby, as rugby fans love to. Biggest thing around at the moment is upcoming Six Nations, follow for the men and followed closely behind by the women's Six Nations. But is it going to be that different this time round with new coaching staff in the men's game?
uh, for me, I'm quite excited about what's going to happen. I think there's a massive opportunity for this squad of players to do something quite special, and I think the crowd deserves it, and we need to re-engage with them. So, it'll be really interesting to see how he goes. And whether or not he tries to go more down the sort of historic Leicester type line, or he tries something completely different, particularly with some of the assistant coaches he's brought in.
Do you think there's much time for him to make a big impact, Dan?
Um, it's an interesting challenge for any coach to come in and change systems and change the way it's played. I mean, inevitably, Borthwick will put a different view on the way the game's going to be played. The interesting thing is he looking to win a Six Nations? Is he looking to win individual matches? Is he trying to prepare for a World Cup? I think what as Leigh's sort of just said, is the crowd want them to come out and play the best that they can play and be enjoyable to watch. And sometimes the problem with the Six Nations is it's played in pretty rubbish weather. So if you've got to play in a cold, wet Twickenham with the wind swirling around, whatever you try and do, it's inevitably not going to be as bright and as breezy as it would be if you're playing in June or July. So that will shape it, but it's whether they want to win each individual game, and how important is that? Will they keep saying, well, we've tried out a few players to see if they're going to be good enough for the World Cup? My own view is that you just play as best you can on the day and don't worry too much about a World Cup, because all sorts of things can get in your way.
I know Borthwick and Jones were very close, and obviously there's been a bit of a steer from Jones towards Borthwick when he's talking about stepping down. How different a style will he bring to what Eddie Jones had created in the England camp?
Well, my view is that Borthwick, Jones, and most of the top coaches will try and create an environment where the players try to express themselves as best they can, because that's the strongest way to do it. It's no point in having a style of play if you don't have the players around to do it, and then they've just got to edge them towards it. I don't think that Borthwick and Jones would necessarily sit down and compare pieces of paper and say, well, this is what's different, this is what's different. It's whether the players want to play in a particular style. Now, if you want them to throw the ball around a lot and take a few more risks, that sounds very good, us talking about it here. But when you're in front of 80,000 and with a high expectation, and you want to be on the, well, it's not a very long plane, it's probably a coach over to France, then as an individual, are you going to tick the boxes that Steve Borthwick wants, or are you going to try and express yourselves in a way you want to play? I think it throws out loads of challenges. I just think it's going to be fascinating watching those games, because we've got two coaches who are new in and looking towards the World Cup. and with Wales and England being two nations who definitely want to beat each other, will they say this is a cup, this is a team we're trying to experiment for the World Cup, or do we want to beat Wales? I think I know what the answer is.
I think personally that they just really need to go out and play. The crowd and the spectators really want to see something from the players and some sort of expression. But the interesting thing for me is this is going to be largely dictated by the halfbacks, and the halfback pairings that are available within that squad are significantly different. What do you think about that, Dan?
Well, I was going to ask you the question in return is, when you say you want to see them play, what do you mean by play?
I think play is really try and do something. In fact, I felt during the autumn internationals that really that they were withdrawn. There was no one really wanted to go, have a go, take things on, and as you say, maybe express themselves. But that might be the limitations that the system was put on them.
So when you say take risk, I mean, sometimes the game isn't it? If you have the ball in your own half between the halfway and the 22, you're sort of caught between the devil and the deep blue sea there, because you can't play too much, because inevitably there are risks. So do you play the kicking battle, or do you try things on? I mean, you look at teams who win World Cups; they often kick more than you expect. So, what does that look like for you? If you were say Ben Youngs, and you had Marcus Smith outside you, had the ball on your own 10-meter line, what happens next? What would you expect if you're sitting in the crowd? What would you want to happen? And is that what England should do?
I think probably if it was Ben Youngs on your own 10-meter line, I'm expecting a box kick. But it is difficult. I mean, I don't necessarily think that those combinations work together anyway. You know, I think he needs to play with someone who's not in the team. Obviously, his club colleague, someone like Danny Care, who plays a little bit more free. But then you can also argue that if you want to play a slightly different style, then maybe Youngs and Farrell are the right sort of combination. But I do take on board that looking at the weather conditions and how that may influence how you can play, maybe that's going to have a large bearing on the selection itself.
I mean, sometimes in order to play, you've got to create pressure on the opposition, and sometimes that comes from pinning them down in their own 22, forcing them to make mistakes, but also just to tire them out. And you can tire yourselves in attack by constantly trying to attack from your own 22, and the forwards will run out of steam, and the defense can just soak it up. So I think there's a delicate balance here, and you're quite right. I mean, does Youngs and Smith work as a combination? I mean, I think that's a challenge. I don't know what the answer. I mean, Ben Youngs is a very good player. You don't win 100+ caps and be a poor player. And certainly some of the Leicester style has been very good. I mean, I wouldn't want to be Steve Borthwick having to stand up in front of the crowd and say, this is my selection, because if they were giving the thumbs up or thumbs down, it might be a bit of a shock to the coach on what they want compared to what he wants.
I'm sure it will be. And I think it's fair to say that looking at the squad and with a new coach in, everyone's got a fair shout as well. You know, so I don't think there's maybe a couple of sure sort of starting positions, but I think a lot of the positions, particularly in the backs, are all up for grabs.
And I think the sense is that, the sense at the moment is he's picking a bit more on form. And some of these players are coming through and they are doing great things with their clubs and a bit in Europe as well. So instead of maybe picking players who maybe suit what Eddie wanted, he's picking players who are exciting. But the trouble is, it's very easy to, and you picked it on yourself, is that can the player play within the system? And I say system in the widest sense, not in you've got to play this way, because you can pick 15 players who are miraculous, but you've got to pick 4 players who can make the heavy hits, 4 players who can carry, 4 players who can kick, 4 players who can do the distance, and not all the players are made the same. So the tough thing is the 15 best players don't make the best team. It's those combinations. I mean, I expect if you asked the English rugby paying public who they'd like to pick out of his group, would that be the same as the start? I mean, if you had to pick your backline now, I don't think it'd be the same as Steve Borthwick's, but I could be wrong. What do you think?
I doubt my backline would be the same as Steve Borthwick's, but I bow to his experience anyway. No, just for me,
what would you want? Would you want to win or would you want them to play?
first and foremost, I think I'd like them to play. I felt that was completely missing during the autumn. I felt during the autumn that the crowd would have accepted a performance and a loss over what they got. So I think there was a chance to sort of re-engage with the public, and it felt really, even on the TV with some of those games, particularly the Argentinian game on the Sunday. I know it was on a Sunday, but you could feel the disconnect coming through the TV, and then in the South Africa game, the final game of the autumn, to have the team booed off of Twickenham has been, I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I thought the South Africa game was a very weird game. I mean, it was punctuated by the scrum problems, and I feel that just caused a problem for the whole game as a whole. I agree. I think you've got to play to win, but you've also got to play to enjoy yourself, and you enjoy yourself if the crowd's with you. It's all part of the experience. You can't cut yourself off from the crowd, and everyone knows that. So let's just try and remember that it's sport. That there's always another game next week, and that's what you've got to do. Unfortunately, there's large sums on the table and engagement, grassroots English clubs will benefit if England win, and maybe not benefit if they play, or if you look at the other way around. If they don't play, then people won't come through the turnstiles.
What do you think, Dan? Owen Farrell seems to be playing right on the very edge. He's just recently again been in trouble for not using his arms in the tackle, and I'm very well aware that the greatest of all time play so close to the edge. You're talking millisecond stuff between a foul or some genius. Then he's brought some of the old guard back in. Do you think he's trying to make it a bit more stable leading into a Six Nations with some experience and a bit of stability?
Well, if you remember a long time ago when Gatland came in to pick his first team for Wales, he pretty much picked the Osprey squad for his first game. And when a team plays, it needs to be connected. And therefore, it would be very silly. And I'm not saying that there are players who are on the periphery who've missed out. We can argue the toss on maybe half a dozen players. I think there's a very good site out there called Gainline Analytics, run by Ben Darwin, and he has analysed the cohesion within squads. And a squad which stays together for longer tends to win more often. So you can't change it up too much. You need to have players who are used to playing at that level, number one, used to playing with each other, and used to, when they arrive, knowing the language. Now, you might say, well, just a moment, the Barbarians can rock up and play and beat established sides. Well, they can. Yet there's other things in play there. Well, first of all, you've got the whole world to pick from. So you're picking some of the most talented players. Also, they can play with a freedom that allows them that if they lose, no one worries. But if they win, everyone remembers. So on average, they're going to have a much better outcome because we're not too worried. But as Leigh just said, if we wouldn't mind if England played and lost. Well, I think we can say that in the comfort of this podcast. But when Steve Borthwick goes to see his seniors and says, "Well, we played, but we lost," will they accept that, and how many of the crowd would accept that? I mean, if you played and lost against Wales, I mean, I live right close to the border, and I used to live in Wales, and that's a difficult conversation on a Monday when everyone's showing you chariots, which wheels flying off in all sorts of directions. Maybe if they'd taken a few more of their penalties and they maybe not run it, then it's difficult. I mean, would you be selecting? I mean, no, Leigh, you do the academy. Would you accept play over success? And I think you'd probably say yes.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
you're not being paid. You're probably not being paid, but you're not being paid to have that success.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're right. I do. Yeah, I would accept the style and the way we play over a win. Certainly, the win is not the driving force for us. But as you rightly say, we are playing amateur under-18s rugby, or the boys are. We are not playing at the top flight, so there are many more added pressures. And I suppose just so we're clear, when I say I'm not, I'm worried about the way England play and not so worried about them winning. That would be my thoughts during the Six Nations, because we've got to give Borthwick and the new squad an opportunity to get out there and find their identity and find their way of playing and find that the right squad. But I think moving forward into the World Cup, which is obviously not very far away, then that sort of statement becomes slightly different.
But do they need to find an identity? I mean, does it matter? I mean, what you don't want to do is arrive at the World Cup and everyone's saying, well, this is England's identity. Maybe the great thing is that there's going to be a surprise. We don't know what's coming. And that's you plan for a team to play a certain way, or no, they've got 2 or 3 game plans. Well, why not have a style? Let's just say we don't know what to expect. I mean, the best New Zealand sides, and I know they tend to be the benchmark. Sometimes they will be playing in a way that we don't expect. For instance, the New Zealand England game in the last autumn internationals, they kicked a lot. They did these lots of cross kicks because they picked out that's how they're going to play, and it worked, but then it didn't. So, do we really want them to be a certain style? I'm just throwing that. I'm not saying that you're right or wrong. I'm thinking, when I watch England, what's going to make me come away thinking I've really enjoyed that as an England supporter? And I mean, obviously, I talk to people from all around the world, so I'm not vehemently for England winning, but when I'm watching the game, I want them to win. Not at all costs, but what's going to make me come away? I mean, it's very difficult to forget that magical game, that semi-final against New Zealand, which was absolutely amazing. I mean, that was a real buzz for all England fans. Ben Youngs was playing then. Was it George Ford was the fly half?
Yes, he was. Yeah, that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great pity he's not playing. But can England play like that again?
I'm sure they can. I'm sure they can, but it's just getting everyone in the right space. You felt during that game that everyone was just a bit sharper and everyone was on the same page. I suppose the only concern in that game was as soon as New Zealand got a sniff, they scored. And I always felt that there wasn't a very big winning margin. There was always an opportunity. You always felt that maybe they might get another chance. But as a performance, it's probably the most complete performance from an England team that we've seen.
The interesting thing for me in this is that, do you want England to win all their games 70-0? There was a period of time, and I'm just trying to think back to the years it was, when England were just hammering everybody. I think it was just before they won the World Cup, and actually wanted the other teams to improve.
Just same with the women's team as well, though, because England have been dominating, and we've all been wanting for Wales, Scotland, Ireland to really invest in their international women's teams to make it more competitive.
But this is where the numbers game is very, very clear. I mean, England does have the greatest number of male players and female players, but when it comes to rugby, that doesn't seem to make such a difference. When it comes to the women's game, it seems to have made a massive difference. And I mean, and the World Cup was very enjoyable, and there were lots of good games, but lots of games were a bit of a waste of time in that sense, because as you say, they would win by 50, 60 points, and is that healthy?
I like exactly what you're saying. I like the idea of the women's game overall being more competitive. So it's not, you don't have those walkovers, if you like. What's I hope this Six Nations is different, but I can't see it being anything other than England and France to take. But I would love to be proved wrong on that one. But
Well,
I think
I
we're
mean,
talking.
the bravest decision would be to say, let's have two England teams. Let's have you can't have an England North because at the moment there are no teams in the North for next year, which is controversial. Why not split England in half and have two teams? I mean, that would give a greater number of players a greater chance, and it would allow us to have games where you are able to support your region. Now I know, and then you come together to play like the Lions in the end. There's lots of problems with what I've just proposed, but that would give more meaningful games, which is what supporters want to go and see. I think, and it's fascinating. If you go to an England women's game, you will see genuine supporters there who are loving the game, loving the players. You go to an England men's game, and the chunk of supporters who are there who have got no memory of the game afterwards, or are there on the lash, and it's just a waste. So it's so different in that sense. So why not build on that? And there's a great momentum in the game, and it could be spoiled by the fact that England will not it's not their fault. Will just steamroll over all the other sides. And despite the fact that all these other sides are improving now in Wales at the moment, there's this fantastic under-18 competition which is going on, which has really galvanized the game there in sense of a direction. There's lots of great things happening, and they've got some really good coaches involved. There's a guy who works with me. When I say work, he's the one of the forwards coaches with the Bristol Bears under-16s, and if they've got him involved, they've got that shows that they've got a real sense of let's grow the game here. But when they come up against England, the progress will not be. They just won't be able to live in the same stratosphere, and that just spoils the chance, because these girls have really enjoyed playing these worthwhile games, and that's what you're going to do. I mean, if you aren't playing worthwhile games, you're going to lose players, and that's a challenge. That's a challenge for any sport, because really you want to go to a game and you want to win most of the time, but it's actually quite nice to lose. It's never nice to lose, but it's not. It's that sense of danger. Otherwise, what's the point?
I think just before we start our game, I think we're pretty sure that the Women's Six Nations is kind of a two-horse race. But just quickly, Dan, your prediction on the Men's Six Nations?
Well, if keep your money safe and don't listen to me. I think that Ireland will inevitably be the top side. They'll be the hardest to beat. They are the most cohesive. I think France second in that, because they have got the most exciting group. I think England will always have that chance, but can they put 5 victories together? And you can't write off Wales with Gatland, because he'll every other year he'll do something and will surprise. So yeah, there we are. I think I would say, without my patriotic hat on, I'd go Ireland, France, England, Wales, Scotland, Italy.
Leigh, your thoughts?
Well, I've already put my money in the place where I think it's going to be. So I'm expecting a massive reaction from England. And I really think that if you get the passion right and you get the attitude right, that they can go out there and there's players out there with lots to prove. I really think there's an opportunity for them to go and do it. So that's what my heart's telling me. If I was going to look at the stats, then I think Ireland are all over it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my heart is England. I really want England to do well, and for lots of reasons. Because I think Steve Borthwick's a really good guy, and I think he's got his heart in the way that we want to play. So, and it's nice to have an Englishman running the team. That's always good.
Mm-hmm. I think we'll kick on then with our first half. Enjoyed that, especially the fact that Dan, I think you're our first guest that's cross-examined the hosts, which is fun.
Well, it gets me out of a few binds, really. That's why I do it.
So, brief introduction to everyone that's listening. Dan Cottrell, rugby coach, was uni at Exeter, and I'm going to take a bit of time on this because there's so much of it because he's so experienced.
No, not experienced, old.
You played for both Bath and Bristol, is that correct?
Yeah, only I played one season at each, so it wasn't. I got a couple of first team appearances, but I can't say that I was first choice.
Well,
despite what my mother said,
it's an achievement. You've coached Mumbles. You've worked with the Welsh Rugby Union. You're a sports editor. You do the Rugby Coach Weekly, where you've got a podcast. Hence the cross-examination, which is fun.
Always welcome.
Yeah, absolutely, always welcome. Written many books on coaching. You travel around the world helping clubs, teams, so on and so forth. You've been working with Bristol Bears women, so the Bristol University.
Not the women. The Bristol Bears under 14s to under 16s. So with what we call the Aspire group, which is the guys coming through, and then the Excel group, which is the under 16s. So I'm one of the assistant coaches there.
And you just done a short series of podcasts called The Coaching Knife, cutting to the root in just 20 minutes, which is short little bite-sized things to the point in coaching. Safe to say, through and through, you love teaching rugby.
Well, I think like all of us, we just like getting up in front of people and making people think we know what we're talking about, and then you get a few nods, and then you think, yeah, I've cracked it. But I think that anyone who enjoys their coaching probably just enjoys the human interaction and allowing people to have a chance to express themselves. But it is also very selfish. You do it because you enjoy it. You do it because you get that feedback, and that feeds you. That's the energy which makes a difference to what you're doing. And the best coaches, I feel, and when I get it right, I know that's what you get. You get that really positive energy, and you get that sense of achievement. And when it goes wrong, it's probably because those connections have fallen apart. And we've experienced that in terms of the headlines with, you see it all the time in football, of course, but in rugby with Dave Rennie's just been sacked by Australia, and it's not what Dave Rennie would have wanted, and that's often it's very sad that they felt that he wasn't making those connections. And obviously a very highly paid job like Leigh's got as the academy coach, he will be thinking, well, the £1 million that I get for this is small recompense for the pain that I go through. But yeah, as a coach, you're just enjoying that part of it. And yeah, sometimes you're very lucky if you get rewarded for it and it's your job. But it can be, and often is, a very enjoyable experience. However, when you're working with people, not everyone's going to agree with you, and that's the tough part.
I read a quote of yours, which I've known you for a while, since you've been here and we've been in communication, and I'm so pleased we've got this going now, because I've been wanting to get you on the podcast for so long, as you know. I read a quote of yours that you said, I've been lucky enough to talk to some inspirational coaches at all levels. The openness and willingness to share is unique to rugby, I believe. And it really struck me that. rugby is so special. But where does your love for rugby come from?
When I was growing up, my favourite sport was cricket. And football. I mean, I say that I qualify that I'm a Bristol Rovers fan, so it is a version of football. And I really cricket was the thing I really wanted to play, and but I also played rugby. But there was a very there's a particular book, and I can't remember what the book is, but it was a book which was celebrating rugby, and within the book, it had 6 famous tries. And what they'd done is they'd taken a snapshot of the try as it had worked its way along, like Richard Sharp scoring for England, Obolensky's try, Hancock's try. And I absolutely loved those pictures. And I drew them out. And also it had in the book, very unusually, it had some set pieces drawn out. Now, this book was from the 70s. And I absolutely loved it. And I think that's where something inside me enjoyed the tactical side of the game. And then I'm old enough to have got Sabutio, and I got Sabutio rugby, and I was absolutely fascinated by that. And I would set it all out. I mean, you didn't play a real game of rugby. It was a very strange version of a game of rugby. And then, but at school, I was an okay player. Wasn't a great fan of tackling, but I did enjoy the tactical side of the game. And then after we were training at school, we'd go and play for another hour or so, just as you would. And I didn't really break through into rugby until I started getting reasonably good at it until I was at university. And then had a couple of breaks and got to play for Clifton in the 3rd division. As I say, had a season at Bath, which was fantastic. And and then went over to Bristol for another season, which didn't work out so well. But in that, I was very lucky. I met some fantastic coaches, so or learned from some coaches. So at Bath, there was Brian Ashton, and it was just fascinating being in that environment. But also at Bath, there were some very good players who went on to be very good coaches. And so there was Andy Robinson, Mike Catt, Richard Hill, the scrum half, Nigel Ollie Redman, Martin Haag. So all, these there, and there are others in there as well. And all these guys went on to be coaches. So you're in that atmosphere of coaching, and that just naturally, if you're listening, you're part of that. And then at Bristol there was Dave Allred, and then my old school Kevin Bowring was the director of rugby there. So started talking to him, and just it was very lucky that I bumped into some really interesting thinkers about the game, and that just really piqued my interest in it. And so that's where the love of it was. But when I was playing rugby, I just wanted to play and play and play. And not, I would like winning, but I just love playing. And I got better, and I was able to make a few tackles by the end. But also the other thing I think you realise when you play rugby is that you see why some players are successful, and then you know why you're not going to be. So you can have the super talented players. So if you ever had a chance, the chance I had was around someone like Jeremy Guskert. The talent was off the charts. I mean, just everything he did faster than everybody without seeming to make an effort. And I don't think he'll mind me saying this. Well, maybe he will, but also at the same time, John Callow was at the club, and his work ethic was unbelievable. I mean, it's just he trained and trained, and eventually he went on to play for England, and he thoroughly deserved it. And yet, in between, you'd have players who'd work hard but would never make it, and players who had loads of talent but never would work at it. And that's fascinating because every time you stand in front of a player, you're trying to work out where they are on the spectrum. And if you can intervene, do you try and help them to work harder or be more realistic? I mean, there are players, Leigh, that probably arrive at your academy and you think, well, in whatever I'm going to do, they're not going to be the player they think they want to be. And other players, you think, oh, if only they would do this. I mean, that must be the main frustration as academy manager.
Yeah, it is. A frustration. You're absolutely right. There are players who, you look at them and whatever you try and do with them, they just can't really understand what they want, what they need to do to become the player they want to be. So, and others who have a lot of talent, but for want of a better word, kind of lazy, really, and almost waste it. So yeah, as you'll know, Dan, it's very tricky trying to find the common ground with these guys, and how do you inspire them, or how do you give them realistic targets? It is difficult, but it's a challenge, and it's a challenge which myself and James and the other coaches and managers in the academy, we enjoy, and it's all part and parcel of its development.
There was an interesting coach I was listening to, a football coach actually, and he was talking about the balance between talent and maintenance, and how much a player takes of your time versus how talented they are. If they're incredibly talented, but they require a lot of your time, okay, that's fine. But if they're not incredibly talented and require a lot of your time, then that's different. And where the balance goes, what you want is them to be incredibly talented and not take any of your time. He said that's the ideal, but at some point you've got to make a decision on, actually, you're not no matter what we do, unless you change your mindset in the whole process, or suddenly become far more talented, we've got to give to others at the same time. Do you find that that's something that you?
I think the ongoing problem is we never have enough time with the players. That being said, you still got to make best use of the time you have, and sometimes that's wasted, and it can be wasted or be inefficient because you are tied up in having to deal with a player who's got various problems, and that player requires time in order to get them beyond those problems. Maybe it's conversations with parents or schools or wherever their stakeholders are. Now, we've got to understand ourselves what we're in it for, because if you are yourself not looking after yourself, and you'll find yourself worrying so much about those conversations that you're not particularly efficient. So you come up to this player and you think, oh, not again, Leigh. I mean, I can't have another conversation with you about this, but you've still got to have it, and you've still got to have that same energy. Now, the bravest coach will say, right, Leigh, we've had this conversation. I'm going to go off and have another conversation with somebody else. But your time here is done with me. I've got to give time to other people. Now, that sort of goes against our human nature as coaches, because we are always reaching out to players to want to support. We always want to help them out. And one of the difficulties within a coaching session is stopping talking to allow the players to get on with what they want without intervening. And that comes with experience. Talking to someone the other day about their tennis coaches, and they said that the young coaches cannot get this balance right. They either want to have too much fun, so we don't get anything done, or they want to intervene too much, or they get angry when we're not doing enough of what we need to be doing. And the more experienced coach knows when to crack in and say, right, let's up this, or to sit back, or to say, right, this session's going to be like this. And that's really hard. That's why there are problems with players who come out of the pro game and go straight to coaching and pick up top jobs, because they don't know when to step in, step out, be friends, not friends. I mean, the most valuable coaching experiences was when you have that right distance, when you are able to smile, enjoy, and share the success of the player without being so close to them that you can't then have a tough conversation about, okay, there's a standard here, you're not reaching that standard, and something's got to change. And I mean, that's a tough conversation anyway, and sometimes that conversation is not going to go well to start with, But if you can't have that, if you don't have that separation, when you can't go home and go to bed and think, I've had that conversation, it was the right conversation to have, I can now sleep. I mean, I wish I could say that about myself, but how many coaches can go home after they've had to tell somebody, I'm sorry, your contract's up, or I'm sorry, you're not in the team. I mean, imagine having to tell a player that, first of all, let's say Simon Middleton had a squad of, I can't remember, maybe 30 players with England. I think that everyone got on the pitch during the World Cup at some stage, but that's a hell of a. Let's say you are in Wales' situation where there was no easy games. Did every single player get on the pitch? And when it came to the big game for England, Simon Middleton had to say to one or two people, "I'm sorry, you're not in the team." Is that an easy conversation? No, it's not. It's a terrible conversation.
Where did you learn how to manage it? Because you've been on both sides. You've played at top level and you coach at top level. But where do you learn to manage those conversations? Where do you learn to get that distance right? Is it from your experience as a player and having that relationship with coaches, or is it something you've learned since you became a coach?
I think it's an ongoing learning. I remember helping out on a level 3 course, and Lynn Jones came in to present. So this was in Wales in the Ospreys. So Lynn Jones was the head coach of the Ospreys, and those who don't know Lynn, he went on and he coached. I think he coached with Russia as well. So he was a successful coach, but he certainly had a style. And he said, selecting players, I've gone through it all. I've gone through. We put the notes on the board on the Monday. We've gone through. I'll ring up every player. I've gone through. I'll hand out bibs during the training session at the end and say everyone's got a blue bib is selected. You can't get it right. In the sense that not everyone's going to be like it. I've heard coaches this year or maybe last year saying, I've asked every player how they want to know about the game, about their selection, and then I will meet that need. I think you can do that if you've got the time.
I was going to say that sounds exhausting.
Well, I think that is exhausting. But if you are in a professional environment where you think you've got the time, then I think that's good. I think that you've just got to set out at the start of the season. This is how we're going to select the team. These are the criteria we're going to try and use, and we're going to. And this is how it will be announced. Now, after the announcement, I will try and find time to have conversations with players if I can. But you're going to have to accept I've only got a certain amount of time. Now, you asked is how I've learned that. Well, as I say, I've been very in a lucky position. I've talked to lots of coaches over time, and coaches are generally quite open. Well, to a certain extent, that the coaches are open, or the coaches are open. There's probably a great chunk of coaches who are very closed, and I've never spoken to because they've either not made themselves available or they've shied away from any of those conversations. I think that when I was playing, we were in a different era. You had to shut up, or you had to put up or shut up and put up. I can't remember the expression now, but you got it. I mean, within the days when we'd get a card through the post. When I was at Bristol, you'd get a card through the post on a Tuesday, or you'd see your name in the paper. It was quite interesting at the time that people thought sometimes I'm mainly playing the second 15. Sometimes Bristol don't quite remember. They're not sure of exactly who's playing because they always put a player in. Well, Andy Player, of course, had to face up to those jokes ever since, and he was a very good player. Played in the second row, and was forever known as the A and other player. I think from many people. I think the danger is that if we try and remember what it was like for us as a player and then try and use that with our teams, we forget that we're all different. We come from a different viewpoint. And even in our conversation there about how would you want England to play, we've probably got 3 different versions of that. So just imagine trying to tell some of your players whether they're in or not. It's probably difficult. Leigh, how do you do it?
Well, we set our stall from the start of the season how it was going to work, and the selection goes out. Well, I'd like to get it out midweek, but that depends on how many of the lads actually can press the button on their phone and tell me they're available.
Yeah.
So they limit what we can do, initially. But once that selection goes out, then as a coaching group, we are available for them to speak to should they wish to discuss the selection and the reason for their non-inclusion. So that's how we tend to do it, which we allow them to approach us however they want to. Would be it a phone call, be it a face-to-face conversation, a message, and have those conversations. So we're very
And how many
open.
conversations do you have on average a week?
Do you
Well,
know?
have after selection?
The conversations probably with the lads are maybe 2 or 3.
And it's the same players or different players?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes. I mean, we obviously try and rotate the squad. We're again limited by the lads that most of them are working now as well, so that throws another spanner in the works. And we have a squad and a half, so it's trying to keep those extra 5, 6, 7 players happy by rotation. But I think all we can do is be upfront, honest, allow them to have an honest conversation with us, and keep that that conversation flow available to them.
I mean, controversially, you could say that being dropped is actually a very good life lesson.
I'm with you on that. Absolutely, life's tough, and a lot of these, both my sons now, one's at uni, one's going to uni shortly, and when they were getting their GCSEs, I likened it to the fact that if you put in your all and you've done your best, what you get will be your best. They're both into sports. Sometimes they get picked, sometimes they don't, and I have to remind them both: if you don't get picked, then work harder. And then when you do get picked, it's because you put the effort in, kind of down to it. Again, like Leigh says, there's a degree of rotation in order to try and keep everybody happy. But yeah, sometimes I think, especially parents that want to know, especially in the younger age groups, why their son hasn't been picked, rather than the son or daughter wanting to know why they haven't been picked, puts a bit of a bubble wrap around them for when they get to real life, and all of a sudden they've gone for that job interview and they didn't get the job interview, and the parents then not going to phone up the company and say, why hasn't my daughter or my son been picked for this company? So yeah, I agree with you. I think it is a strong life lesson,
and it's a low stakes life lesson as well, which is you don't get picked one week, you might get picked the next week. The hard conversations come when the player is moving up the levels and hoping to break into the academy, and those are tougher. You're in the academy set up for 2-3 years, get to 16, and obviously the pyramid narrows quite sharply, and you're dropped out. You were the best player, and now you're surplus to requirements. And the key, I think, overall is the parents are such a big part of it. We can't ignore that part of it. We live our lives through our children. I mean, we want them the very best. I mean, when my sons tell me about their successes and failures, it can change my day, completely. And any parent who is into their parenting will be part of that. And it's hard. It's hard when your child comes home and says, "I'm not selected again," and you don't know everything that's going on and why the coach is doing that. And sometimes the coach is making a mistake. They are not focusing on the right things. And do you go in and have that conversation? Do you say, what are you trying to do with this team? The thing which I did with Mumbles, so my involvement with Mumbles was under sixes. Nobody stepped forward, so I thought, well, I was going to try and not step forward, but I'll do it. So I went down, and I've told this story a few times, so apologies for people who've heard it before. Is that I went down with this fantastic session plan. We were on the beach in Mumbles. He was very lucky to do that. I set it out. My son also had his own session plan because he fancied himself as a coach. He set up his own area, and the kids went off and played something else completely different. So what I realized is you don't play rugby at under sixes. You crowd manage, and they enjoy it. But over the time, the two coaches I worked with, though we didn't always agree on how the session should look, we agreed that every player should have equal playing time. And I had this fantastic Excel spreadsheet to plan out how it worked. So we did it that way for a season or two. And then the other guy said, it's much simpler than that. We're just going to go, right, everyone has a number. Let's say there's 12 players on the pitch. We had 18 players at 1 to 18. Right, 1 to 6, you're off. Right, game goes. Okay, 7 to whatever it is, 12, you're off, the next group are on. And we just rotated like that. And that meant every player turned up knowing they're going to get as much as game of time as everybody else. We never had any selection issues. No one was worried about whether they're going to play or not because everyone did play. And we won some, we lost some. We played in a tournament at Lupton, and we got to the final and we won the final. And in the second half, our two best players went on the pitch. And that was one of the best moments of the whole time that I was involved, because they still won with that. Now the next year we lost. The next year we lost plenty of games we could have won, and it meant that the pressure was off. We never felt at the end of it. We were disappointed when we didn't beat local rivals, perhaps, or ones that we wanted to beat, but it didn't matter that much. But and I'm rattling on a bit here, but I think the advantage for us was the three coaches who were involved with rugby elsewhere. So our Sunday team wasn't a reflection on our other parts of our rugby. So I think that makes it harder for coaches who've only got one team that they're involved in, and therefore they don't have another team to go off and feel that they can do other things with. And that's as I said earlier on, we coach because it makes us feel good. That's where the energy comes from. And if something's going wrong with the team, we start losing the energy, it becomes much, much harder. And if we don't have that alternative, I mean, I'm sure that you are both proponents of kids play as many different sports as you can. Don't become just all rugby. To have other things, have other interests, because if the rugby's not going well, then there's got to be other things you've got to fall back on. And in a school circumstance, it's great if you can do a range of subjects, because you're going to hopefully find one or two which are going to work for you, and maybe the sport is the thing which works for you. And the trouble has been that if sport is your get out, is what happens when you're injured. So I think there's about 18 threads for you to pick up there. See which one you want to run with.
My eldest, when he was at school, and he's wanted to be a goalkeeper. He plays football. He wanted to be a goalkeeper since he was 6 years old. And when he went to secondary school, of course, there's an enormous amount of other sports to play, and as sporty kids often are, I've got two boys. I can only assume it's the same with girls. If you've got sporty kids, they do well at sports, full stop. And he'd play rugby, and he'd play all the other sports that they had there. And he kept saying to me often that, what does he do? Because he wants to focus on his football. And I said to him all the time, play as many sports as you can. And if there's a crossover at some point, then you have to make a decision. He said, yeah, but I don't want to let the other teams down, because you got that team mentality. I don't want to say I want to play rugby and then football come along and then I can't play. It's like, well, that's just not a problem. If that happens and you don't get picked for the rugby team next time because you've been off playing football, then that's it. But play everything you can play, enjoy it, and when you have to make a choice then.
Yeah, I think that's. I mean, that the problem is that we put players on a talent pathway, and they then get stuck on it, and it's hard to to break out of it. There's a sunk cost syndrome that I've put so much effort into it. I can't leave it because I've dedicated my life to it, and that's where we probably get that talent pathway wrong. It's tough. I'm not. I think there's lots of good work going on in it, but sport really should be for the enjoyment. And the great thing is, if you've got leagues, it means that you can play against people who are of your standard, and then you play the game, have a beer. If we're thinking rugby sense, enjoy having a laugh with your mates, and then there's something else coming up.
And you talked earlier on about the fact that you got into rugby because you picked up a book and loved the technicality of it. Knowing you as a coach and listening to you now, at what point did you decide that you wanted to be a coach? Was it the very first time you picked up that book and saw the technicality, or?
I think I'm the oldest of three. And my brothers would say that I was probably thinking I was going to be a coach right from the start, because I was bossing them around from there. And probably I like bossing people around. I'm not particularly bossy, but I like to sort of think I can tell people what they could do. And then, but I never really thought I was going to go into coaching until I made a choice after university to I wanted to go into marketing. Didn't quite work out, so I went into accounting, and I quite enjoyed it, but it wasn't me. And then as I think I mentioned before, I was very lucky. I was in quite a lot of conversations with Kevin Bowering, who went on to coach Wales. He wasn't Welsh coach then, and then was head of elite coach development with England. And I think he saw that that's something I was enjoying doing. I was just enjoying the rugby and how it worked. And I wasn't a very good coach because I didn't know the process. I knew drills because we did drills when I was doing rugby, and I enjoyed the drills. I enjoyed training. So there wasn't a moment when I thought, I'm a coach, until Kevin Bowering said, and I remember sitting on the bench looking over the first team pitch at school, and him saying, "Have you thought about teaching?" And I went home. I was living at home at the time, and my parents, I said, and my mother said, "At last, you've worked it out." So I think they saw it, a teaching that was, and then the coaching sort of came from that.
It's always interesting to me, and Leigh's a teacher, well, ex-teacher as well. Always interesting to me how many teachers seem to progress into rugby, I suppose, because I've looked into the rugby side, but how many, especially international coaches, have come from a teaching background. And like you say, is it because players understand the process, the drills, and all the rest of it, but coaching something different again?
I think that's the start. That's the start of a massive podcast. But I think it'd be fascinating to know how you came to it, Leigh.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So my teaching career, I sort of fell into it, if I'm absolutely honest. I finished my degree, my physics degree, in when was it now? 91, I think. And there wasn't that many jobs out there at that point. And I got a call from the government one day saying, "Would you like to go and do a postgraduate in education? And we'll give you £4,000." And I was like, "Well, I'm not doing a lot." And so I popped up to Keele, did my postgraduate, and got into teaching that way. But I was going to say before, but for me and coaching, I think there's a real synergy between teaching, having that desire to help children, help kids progress. And that's, I think, the reason that many teachers find their way into coaching, because it's a similar thing, but it's a thing which it doesn't carry all the extra baggage that teaching does. You can get out there and coach and help the kids and get that fulfillment and enjoyment without those other pressures.
And having to write reports, doing vigilation, all those sorts of things. And it's easy to pick up and put down. You can coach. I'm guessing coach is going to take out 6 hours of your week, in terms of 2 sessions and maybe a game. But I mean, when you're in teaching, well, you know what it's like. It's full on. It's inevitably tiring, but also, you can't walk away from it because you've got to pay the bills.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's teaching is very much a mindset. It's people that are into it, and people that aren't. It's a certain type of person that does it, in my view. But it's very much a lifestyle type job, I suppose, similar to nursing, that type of thing. But being able to be in a coaching environment and get yourself away, from the school or whatever environment you're in with your particular teaching, makes a massive difference. Removes the pressures and gives you some sort of freedom. And those the rewards are huge, as you were saying earlier. Once you get that, you get something back from the kids, or you've delivered a decent session, or you watch a game and a move comes off, or something, or even at the end of the game where they're all congratulating each other. You get a massive benefit from that, and reward. So yeah, I mean, that's why I'm into it, I think.
I think that's all. I mean, what you're saying there is why a lot of coaches are actually in it, is because it is actually very selfish. You should enjoy it for the successes you have, and then try and work out how can I have more successes, because the better you are and the more successful you are, the more successful the people are around you. And that, I don't mean winning. It's not the win-loss ratio. It is those connections. And I've been looking at my coach. So last night I was with the Bristol Bears 14s, 15s, what's called the Aspire group. So these are the guys who aren't actually at the top, but they're hoping to get to the top. So a couple of hours with them, and then with the University of Bristol women's team. And both sessions, I came away this time absolutely buzzing. Both worked really well for different reasons. But the Bristol women's one I enjoyed particularly because we got down there a bit earlier, and just chatting to the girls, asking them some questions. Some was about their courses, some was about where they were, and also just throwing in a few questions. So I asked them 2 questions, which were potentially controversial. The first question is, Ireland women are stopping wearing white shorts because of when it's women's periods, there's potential that it shows up and they get embarrassed by it. But some other people have said, well, just a moment, we shouldn't get embarrassed by it because this is the natural way of life, and it's celebrating women's the way that women are. And I asked the girls what they thought, and I said it. Hopefully, I said it in a way that I didn't know what the answer was, and it was interesting that a lot of them they said, well, we prefer not to have that as an issue for us when we play. So that was one, and the other one was that someone had written for us that women shouldn't be treated as little men because they have a different makeup. And I said, well, what do you think about that? Should we write this? Because I don't know. I'm trying to write the best, or trying to put the best information out there, and I want to know what you think. And again, they came back with some very interesting and different views on it, which was very helpful. And I did it because I was being selfish, because I wanted to know, but I understand that also creates a connection, because I'm talking about stuff which either matters to them, or they think, well, at least Dan is not just talking about why I made that tackle, or why am I presenting the ball in the best possible way. And that's what makes it worth it. It's the conversations you have, the corridor conversations, which is a popular term that you get a lot done in meetings, but you often get quite a lot done in the corridors by having those informal chats.
Let me just ask a question just to wrap up our first half. If in the end of all time you get to come back Do you come back as a player or do you come back as a coach?
But you want to come back as a player. I mean,
Yep.
the times there was a couple of times yesterday when I was thinking, I think I'd quite like to get in here, but then I realised that I can't actually move in the way that some of these guys are moving, and so natural. I'd never be able to do that. You want to play. I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, I love the coaching. I want to play. I mean, that's why I play golf and just think about golf far too much. Is because I just love playing. I love coaching, but if you gave me a choice, it's playing.
What about you, Leigh?
Yeah, no question. But come back as a player. I want to play. I play every day if I could. Well, I sort of used to anyway. Even though your body's a little bit broken, put a bit more tape on it, and away you go and have another go.
Yeah.
It's for all these lads out there that are playing, or lads and girls. I should be very fair about that. The people that you hear of that are saying, "Oh, I'm getting a bit too old for this. I can't do this. I can't do that." Once you get to a point where you can't do it, right, it's over. So you've got to make the most of it now. Get out there and play.
You got to come down.
Long
on a
time
Wednesday, Leigh.
retired. Long time retired.
So I think we'll wrap up our first half because I'm conscious of the time. We'll just have a brief half-time announcement. To all that's listening, we're trying to promote grassroots. If you've got a club and you've got something you want to put out, whether it's help or support, whether it's something you want to shout about and promote, by all means, get in touch with us at info@BeMoreRugby, or connect with us on the socials and ask us, and we're happy to promote. But this halftime, we've got Dan Cottrell on. I want to promote his Rugby Coach Weekly. It's something that I know down here at Wimborne Rugby Club, it certainly helps. Lots of great advice, lots of great tips, lots of great drills, everything you need as a grassroots and probably a higher level coach. Dan, where's the best place? Is just to go on the website, rugbycoachweekly.com?
Yeah, it's rugbycoachweekly.com, not .net. It is. I think we didn't get the .com domain, or it was too expensive in the old days. And also we are well, the very first. Not that you'll be able to see it because I've got that. And not that I have it carried out. This was not sure if that goes into view, but that's the old, or the very first Rugby Coach Weekly, very first Rugby Coach thing, which was done September 2003. So 20 years this year of writing. I reckon about 2 million words. I mean, they're not my words, not all my words. I've had to edit them. There's lots of coaches' other words in there.
Well, get on and search Rugby Coach Weekly. You'll find it, and get on your podcast platforms as well. Rugby Coach Weekly podcast is on there. Dan and his colleagues interviewing some amazing rugby guests. Right, we'll move on. Second half. Dan, this is where we like to bring in the ethos of what we're doing at Be More Rugby. Talk about how rugby can be a positive influence on our general lives, how we can use it ourselves. And we like to start the second half off with, Dan, what does rugby mean to you?
So I'm going to qualify that. Is that all sport or rugby in particular?
Yes.
Yes. Well, that's or both. Well, I think I'm just going to take us back a bit. Now, the reason why you're doing this podcast is you've written this amazing book, and to actually sit down and write a book of that length is one hell of a task. You don't do it overnight. It takes a very long time to do, and the effort that's put into that is a good indication of why sport and rugby is really important. So if you are willing to do that, on top of a job, on top of two busy boys who probably had your endless taxi service as well, and no doubt a very generous bank. It shows that rugby is full of people who are very dedicated to the game, and they're dedicated for what I think is a lot of the right reasons. Now, I love football as well. I mean, I'm not very good at it, and I'm a Bristol Rovers supporter, so it's a version of the game. But the fan base and the way that it's treated there isn't the same in terms of dedication. I mean, they are dedicated in an unbelievable way, but in a way which is so focused on the team and how a team is doing, progressing, and not on the individuals within the group. So I think that what rugby does, and it's not unique as a sport, but what it does do is it allows lots of different people chances to be the best versions of themselves. I know that's a bit of a platitude. It's a game for all shapes and sizes, but it's also a game for lots of different types. So you can sit in a changing room and ask people's backgrounds, and some of them will have gone through and they will have decided that physics was a great degree to take. And we did our degrees at about the same time. We came out to the job market at about the same time, and yet there'll be other people who have gone through and they've come into education at a later time, or they've dropped out of education earlier, but they are doing a job in a different way. Or someone within there will say, "Oh, sorry, you do this? Can you come and help me do that?" There's a great outfit out there called the School of Hard Knocks, and they've built on that, the fact that you give these players some confidence. You can see that they can work together in a group. The physicality of it is really a moment where you know that you're in the group and smashing into each other, smashing into the opposition. And I'm not saying that rugby is all about smashing into other people. It's an invasion game. And they'll go to a rugby club, and if the person's half decent, they're not TWAT, then someone might say, "I'm going to give you a bit of a lift here. Why don't you come and help me out? What can you do?" And that happens in rugby clubs all the time. And that is why I think rugby has a fantastic opportunity to offer a section, not everyone is suited to rugby, a section of society, a step up in the world. And life is tough. Life has got lots of things which throws at us, but it's also got opportunities to connect on lots of different levels. And I'd say this about the women's game in particular. It's created an amazing space for a group of people who would not normally be able to play sport in the same way and access rugby and access a team and be with people who are like them or not like them, but still not feel uncomfortable. Now, the thing is that we live in a society where some people will always have an advantage. And I'm absolutely not about politics, because I know you're very clear you don't want to talk about politics. I'm not talking about politics here, but I'm talking about acceptance. You can go into a rugby club, into many rugby clubs, not all, many rugby clubs, and you'll be accepted for who you are. Now, sometimes the banter then creates barriers, and that's where rugby clubs get it wrong. It becomes a sort of an underlying bullying where you get picked up on things you've done wrong. And if the rugby club doesn't, if someone said, give that guy a break there. But the best banterers will pick on the people who should be able to take it, and they'll leave alone the people who may be more sensitive. And yeah, in a long-winded way, I just think it provides those moments where you feel you can make a mistake, be told it's a mistake, but it doesn't matter. And perhaps that's what it is. It's very chaotic. It was a very chaotic game. So I think Leigh said, alluded to the fact that the England performance against New Zealand was perfect. And I know exactly what you meant, is that you didn't mean that England got it right the whole time, but it was the most complete given that the most complete can be 50% or 60% of what looks perfect.
Yeah, very interesting, Dan. Very interesting. Another question for you, which you may have already answered, to be absolutely honest, within that one. But for you, what have you learned from rugby that has helped you most in your life? I think we should have written these down before.
No. I think I've just there's 3 or 4 answers going through my head, and of course you're always thinking about what's the cleverest answer that you can give, and I think the main thing is that it's helped me talk to lots of people on lots of different levels, and understand that you can find common ground with lots of people if you're willing to make the effort. And if you can find that common ground, suddenly a whole new life opens up to you, which you understand. And you can go through life being having a very narrow group of people you speak to who you always agree with and have a laugh with, and that's fine. But actually, if you can pull up a conversation with anybody, then you begin to learn a lot more about life, a lot more about yourself, and it just makes it a richer place. So, yeah, rugby. I think I've said it. I said it before. Is a fantastic place for different people from different backgrounds, and I think one of the challenges, certainly at academy level, is to try and absolutely not anti-private schools at all, but it is trying to get that balance of good rugby players who don't then go off and get the scholarships to private schools, because there's still a whole group of players who are you don't have that access, or maybe don't want it, and we don't want to have that divide. We want to just take the piss out of you, excuse my language, for the mistakes you make, not for your background. I mean, that's probably where we go wrong, is when we start to pick up people. Well, you're that, so therefore I judge you that. No, I'm going to give you a hard time because you threw the ball in the coach's face accidentally, or you had a pratfall here, or you kicked the ball on the ground when you meant to kick it in the air. That's the sort of mistake or error that we want to have a go at. Not the fact, nothing to do with the where you come from. And it's always sad when you get judged on your accent, the way you look, and where you come from the car. You probably have a go at some people for the cars they drive. I think that's fair enough. I think I've seen the car you drive, James, and there is some mileage in that one. But that's for another day.
Oh yeah, that's a very comprehensive answer. Actually, I love that. When I talk to my son Dan, Daniel as I call him, which he won't let me call him Dan anyway. So when I say Dan, it's only for the sakes of people that know him. Leigh knows him very well. He loves his rugby, really wants to get stuck in. But I've always tried to help him, especially in the early days when he went out on the wing and ball wasn't coming. He kind of wanted to chase in the ball, and all of a sudden he's competing with his own centres for the ball and all the rest of it. And I think it's probably given him an understanding of the importance of being in place to look after your position and give support where support's needed, but to be patient in the first place. And I think that's helped him because, the last few seasons, he still might not be getting the ball all game because it's just not that game, but he's stuck out on the wing and he's been patient and he's made sure he's covered. And when there has been a need for him to be there, he's been there. But what would you hope young girls and guys that are coming into rugby, if there was one thing that they took from rugby at grassroots level into their lives, what would you hope it would be?
Well, it's interesting you say that about your son and trying to be patient. Now, inevitably in rugby, the ball will tend to go to players who are in positions where they want to carry. They'll make themselves more available. I think that you got to create your own path, but you've got to make things happen for yourself. You cannot wait for the game to come to you. And last night we were challenging the players to say, how many impacts have you made on this training game that we've been playing? And we're trying to make the training games more and more look like a game of rugby. We're trying to move away from forcing a game on them, which doesn't look like what they might play on Saturday. Now, or Saturday or Sunday. So how can you impact this game? And therefore, you've got to take responsibility for that. Now, I'm going to make some constraints, if you want to use that word, some rules in the game which will involve players. We'll move players around. That's where you can force it. So we're going to have maybe different 9 and 10. After that, it's up to you. And we'll encourage you to do it. How can we as coaches make the players more responsible for their own training and more responsible for their improvements? Because as soon as they start taking more responsibility, things will happen for them. The fact that you were having that conversation with your son is fantastic, and you were encouraging them. And I think as a challenge for a coach is to work with the players and the parents, perhaps if you're working with the younger players, is to say, do they understand what they're supposed to be doing in the game? Not in a massive tactical or technical way. How can I impact on this game? Now, in football, with a goalkeeper, the game comes to you naturally. So you can't change it. If you win the game 10-0, you may not touch the ball that many times. In a game of rugby, inevitably the halfbacks will have more touches on the ball. My challenge would be to a winger, if they are playing winger for the whole game for whatever reason, you can still be involved in the game. Where can you make some impacts? And what would those impacts be which work within the team? But also, you wouldn't just ask that player, you would ask the other players and say, we don't involve people just for the sake of it. You know, Daniel hasn't received a pass for 30 minutes. You don't just pass him the ball because he hasn't touched the ball for 30 minutes. You pass him the ball or he impacts the game because it matters to the team. So what is that? What difference is it going to make? So you could say, right, the impacts could be chasing kicks, hitting rucks, being the support player off the inside centre, being the support player off the winger, coming off their wing to support the play through here, being covering the backfield, being behind the kicker, being the person who calls in where the plays are. And suddenly you've got a menu of things that they could be involved in. Now, if you put that in front of a player who's played on the wing once, that's far too many things. So you're going to say, what's going to be my easiest win here for this player? Now, I played most of my better career on the wing, and sometimes I wouldn't get the ball much at all. And I probably needed to challenge myself to make myself have more interventions. I probably did a bit more than some wingers. But then I watched my youngest son, who's playing for Old Reds, and he's played the last few games on the wing, and he had an amazing number of touches on the ball, but I can't actually recall him receiving many passes on the wing. So the way that the team played meant that the wingers had to be thoroughly involved, because if they weren't, then other players would be shattered. And I mean, it's I'm thinking I'm writing an article here in my head as we're speaking. I hope this is recorded and I can take this off. Where can we help players make more impact in the game? The best position I always think on the pitch is the prop, because they're in the game the whole time. They've got a chance to lump into players if they get angry. They've got probably chances to carry the ball. They've got a chance to make tackles, and they've got a chance to be frustrated with the backs when the backs don't do the right things. Saying that, I gave up propping when I was I think I propped the last time I was about 14 or 15. So I'm glad I didn't. I grew up in a bit faster than they, and they realised that he's certainly not aggressive enough to be a prop.
You mentioned responsibilities you touched on, and it's something that I'm very keen to try and sort of spread the word on, because everybody's got rights at the moment, and everybody falls back on their rights, and it's almost I think especially for youngsters, and probably I'll bang on too much to my lads about this. If you think about a game of rugby like we do, I liken rights to the laws of the game, in that it's your right to not get a particular tackle, a high tackle, but it doesn't mean to say it's not going to happen. It's also your right, if you want to play in that game, you have to follow those laws, and the opposition has to follow those laws in order for the game to happen. But your responsibility is to learn, to train, to become better at it. Because if you don't take on your responsibility, the laws aren't going to protect you. You're still going to get battered. You're still going to you're still going to lose. You're still going to be missing tackles or not catching passes. And the responsibility of youngsters today, I don't think, is perhaps driven home enough by, dare I say it, parents, if I really want to alienate everybody from watching this podcast. And too much attention's put on their rights. It was interesting you saying about the responsibility of, players and parents and coaches alike, probably to help to develop players for rugby, but also for life. It's a tough gig, and it's not going to get easier, but you can get better at it. But don't rely on the laws to protect you. Rely on your responsibilities.
Yeah, and I mean, it's very difficult when I'm vehemently agreeing with you to try and put a different angle on it. One of the lessons probably that we all learn is that nothing gets done until you do it yourself. And you the more that we rely on others, the more we probably lose out on developing ourselves. There's a very good book on my shelf. I can't remember who it's by. It's called Obliquity. And don't ask me to spell it. I know it starts with OB, Obliquity. And it's the idea that your happiness comes from hard work and achieving things, as opposed to seeking thrills. So the thrill seekers are rarely content. I mean, who's content, but are rarely content. You come off a hard rugby session, and that sense of well-being within you is fantastic. If you come out of a challenge, so we mentioned a bit of the coaching knife. So the coaching knife is these 20-minute podcasts, and they're short, but they're short because no one's allowed to ramble. I mean, you've let me ramble. I mean, I would have interrupted me all the way through on the coaching knife, and the coaches are coming away from it and said, "Flip, that's gone in no time. I really enjoyed it because it," and it's about that, putting ourselves under the right pressure. Pressure is a privilege in sport. There's for anyone who plays golf, putt out everything. I mean, obviously, if it's right over the hole, but putt out everything, because there's a great sense of achievement if you make a 3-foot putt, because it's far enough away that you can mess it up, but close enough that you get success. I mean, one of the a great sport is basketball, because everyone's got a chance of success of putting the ball in the net. That's why it's a very good game to play. So if we have enough, I think it's called desirable difficulties, where it's just enough to make it feel like you want to carry. This is why kids are addicted to video games, because they create enough problems that you can't walk your way through it. But if you learn something and you're more successful in it, you can have another go, but you can still make mistakes. Going back to the theme is what Leigh said about England's perfect performance. The fact is, they didn't have a perfect performance. It was a great performance, and they still made mistakes within it. So they can go away and say, we can correct these mistakes. I've heard a couple of coaches in the before Christmas saying we didn't put an 80-minute performance in. Well, you're never going to have that. Someone said very wisely, I thought the other day to me, it's not just about applying pressure, it's about absorbing pressure. Some teams seem to absorb pressure better than others, and you absorb it, and then you're getting upset. Is that the best you've got? And then they say, "Yeah, it is. I haven't got anything left." I mean, I've gone right off what your original question was, and I'm not sure if you even asked the question.
I don't mind. I'm loving
jumped
listening
in.
to you. It's great to have you ramble anyway.
Well, we can pose another one for you, Dan. How's this one?
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
here we go.
worried.
What advice would you give to anyone thinking of taking up rugby?
To play the game. Well, I think first of all, go to a place where your friends are. Would be a good start. Try and be as local as possible. It's interesting trying to encourage people into the game. Part of any sport is the connections you make with the people that you're with, and I mean more and more there are people really working hard to be more effective as coaches. So there's really good coaching going on where the coaches are really caring about it. Don't join a team because it's winning lots. I think I would probably say don't do that, because they probably don't need you. Number one, and number two, it's about being with people and developing with people. You get a feel for it. I mean, the thing is that it takes a pretty big leap to join a club in the first place. And I mean, I think I'm unusual. I just would go wherever I was. I would just go straight down to the local club. When I moved to the Mumbles, I went straight down with my boots on a training night and just said, I just want to play. And I was happy to do that. Lots of people would find that difficult. So if you're at school, who else is playing rugby? Can I come along? And yeah, there's a really good site out there. Sean Phelan runs a thing called Fill Your Boots, FYB, and he's always trying to encourage people to come into the game. So yeah, look up his site. Big shout out to you for Sean, if you're listening, and if you're not listening, why?
Fill your boots, everybody. Get
Yeah.
on that one. I think I'm going to have to call time on this game, because much as I'd happily sit here and talk with yourself and with Leigh all night, I think we've probably all got to wrap it up at some point. Dan, I'd like to say thank you for a start, but I think my takeaways are from talking with you are rugby's that all-inclusive game that gives you the ability to fit in no matter who you are. But I loved your comments about the fact that the people that you are involved with in rugby, you find common ground with, even though you might be completely different, and how much that teaches you about yourself and can help others at the same time. You've talked about friends. You've talked about pressures and how much it can help you generally. I just loved it. Really loved it. Really up my street. Thank you. What about yourself, Leigh?
Yeah, some great stuff tonight, Dan. I mean, I said I enjoyed the session when you came down to the club and did the live session here. That was great. But it's always interesting talking to people and just looking at how they approach it or what their views are on certain things. Obviously you picked up on my word perfect, which you've exploited all through the night.
Yeah.
So
and too right. Yeah. You're not going to get away with that.
I'm sure I said almost perfect, but we'll have to have a check on that. Yeah,
I'll edit almost out. Don't you worry.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, bringing that in. Cut out the word almost.
But no, it's great. Just getting different ideas and different feel for what people think the game is all about, and how it can help for me particularly younger people in society.
Well, I was going to say I interrupted what you were going to say there, Leigh, but Well, first of all, I mean, the fact you're doing the podcast is brilliant, and the book, James, is fantastic. The fact that you wrote it in the first place and spent that time doing it, but it is also it's written from the heart, and it's really, really good to read, because when I say you don't pull any punches, what I mean by that is that you say this is what it's like. You're not holding back on what you feel is important, and not everyone's going to necessarily agree with everything which is in it. But we need to be in a situation where we're able to discuss stuff and walk away and say, "Great, I don't have to agree with you, but we've enjoyed what we've talked about." So I think that's really important. But again, I'm obviously because you're at the other end and you're paying me lots of money for this podcast. I would just say that the stuff that you're doing, both of you, is absolutely amazing, and the kids are really lucky. I mean, obviously, anyone whose parents are involved is fine, great, but running things like academies will make a massive difference to lots of young people's lives, and they're very lucky that you're doing that. And whether you use my stuff or not is actually immaterial. The fact that you're there, you're giving them an opportunity to do things, and not be doing other things. And I don't mean being on the corner streets being naughty, just being themselves, learning about each other, creating some bonds which may last a lifetime, or may be that you bump into them in 10 years' time and you say, remember then the time when Leigh said we had the perfect game, and we never did. We were awful, but we still won.
They'll say, yeah, he never said that. So it was almost perfect, but not quite.
Nobody will remember almost. Dan, thank you. Very kind words. If anybody is interested, the book's proceeds are going to the Academy here. It's on Amazon Prime. Rugby, be the best you can be. Oh, Amazon full stop, not Amazon Prime, but very kind of you to mention it, Dan. And I urge everybody to get on Rugby Coach Weekly. It's got such great advice and help on there as well, and jump on Dan's podcast and listen to him talking to some amazing guests on there as well.
So I just add, I talk a hell of a lot less. They do all the talking, not me.
I've listened. It's
Thankfully.
very good. I'm a big fan. So, and thank you, Dan. It's been a long time trying to get you on here. I'm really, really pleased we managed to. Leigh, thank you so much for jumping in and being our guest host.
You're welcome, James. I hope it worked seamlessly.
Absolutely.
Almost
perfect.
Almost. I know it was coming.
But no, thank you very much. Thank you, Dan. To everyone that's listening, if you're enjoying it, please like and follow. It will help us spread the ethos a bit further. And until next time, be more rugby. Thank you, Leigh.
Thank you, James.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you,
guys. Dan. Hope to catch up soon when you're back down.
Yeah, definitely. I shall be down there. You've got some people who are pulling strings to yank me down there, so I shall be there.
Fantastic. And thank you, everybody.